audiophile headphones and Bluetooth headphones do not normally mix. So, does the Drop Panda change any of that? Let's find out. So this is an orthodynamic, which is kind of something in between a planar and a dynamic. And I'm not going to get too crazy technical in this review and just cover the points that I feel like should matter to you guys in your overall purchasing decision as to whether or not this thing really even matters. It's wireless. It has THX AAA amps in it, which if you're into audio, you know that is a good thing. If you're not, it essentially means they're pretty good amps. So let's start with the build. The Drop Panda is reasonably well built. The one that I have here is a pre-production model, so it's not perfect. There are a couple of complaints I have, but overall it's turned out positive. First off, the headband on top is a little bit thin. This could definitely use more padding, but the clamp force is fantastic. I would not change the clamp force one bit. It's nice and strong. Some people might not like that, but I personally do, especially on Bluetooth headphones, because I'm gonna need them to stay on my head if I'm out walking or running or doing pretty much anything where I need wireless headphones. The pads are made out of a nice material and the memory foam is great, but the pads are a little bit shallow after the memory foam is broken in some. As memory foam warms up, it starts to conform more to your body's shape, and as that happens with these headphones, eventually my ear starts to touch the inside of the cup. Now, thankfully, they thought of this and they put foam on the inside, so it is soft, but after a while, this does squish my ears just a little bit. Though I normally don't have this problem until, like, say, an hour and a half, 2 hours in. Now, I also wish that the mechanism for vertical adjustment went down just like 1 or 2 clicks more. It does just barely reach where it needs to for my big ol' head, but it could probably be a problem for some people who have even larger heads than me. Doesn't look like it on camera, but I have a giant head. And this came with a flat carrying case. Thank you for making these fold flat, as well as a USB Type-C cable for charging and a 3.5mm plug for listening on a computer or a phone that is wired, which is a bit rare these days, but hey, I still appreciate you if you're a phone manufacturer making a phone with a headphone jack. But that also means you can use these for gaming at your computer, which I guess I'll get into that during sound. Last thing on build, this is a pretty simple control scheme and it makes sense. I'm glad they didn't go with touch controls on this, because touch controls I feel like often are intuitive. They change from headphone to headphone, different gestures. This is just click into play, click into pause, left and right or forward and back on the tracks, up and down is volume, hold it to turn it on and off or to pair. Easy. You don't even have to look at the manual to know that, but there is a manual if you really, really need help figuring it out. Then there's a Type-C plug on it for charging, which, great. And of course our 3.5mm like I talked about. Now let's talk about sound. So this is a pair that I actually did not measure the frequency response on. This is done 100% old school by ear, the old DMS way. In sub bass, this extends reasonably well. I can feel the sub bass, but I can't quite hear it as much. Now that may be because it starts to roll, or it could be because the mid bass is a little bit bloated in some areas. It's not overkill, it's not muddy, but there are times where the sub bass and bass will bloom a little bit into the lower mid range. But aside from that, the mid range is great. And I really only noticed this on warmer sounding tracks. In most other cases, it just added a more full sound to the music I was listening to. But the lush mid-range on this headphone really does help. The mid-range is pretty intimate, and up until you get to the upper mid-range, that's when things start to space out a little bit, not in a bad way. The mid-range is very tight and controlled. That with the slightly warmer tuning is made it pretty enjoyable and smooth sounding. Now that upper mid-range is also pretty smooth, but it seems to space out farther. The sound staging on the Drop Panda seems to be very dependent on what range you're in the frequency response. But we'll get into staging in a moment. I don't know if you guys could hear that train or not. The treble is definitely a little bit elevated, but I couldn't pick out any particular large peak among the whole thing, which is generally a good thing. It gives the highs a bit more of a sweet sound and makes it less sibilant. And one thing these did well that a lot of headphones can't quite do without sounding harsh is snares. And somehow this thing managed to nail snares, which I absolutely love that. Now that probably means there's a little bit of a dip somewhere in the treble, but I'm not complaining if it makes listening that much more enjoyable and less fatiguing. Kind of reminds me of what HD650 can do with some parts of the highs, but these are nowhere near as dark as the HD650 are. Now this slightly warm and semi-V-shaped tuning is going to make this headphone appeal more to general consumers, I think, but it also can make it a pretty fun headphone. So with that, let's move into soundstage and imaging. Now, imaging on this is very interesting. I do have a decent center image. Oh, it's a little bit wide. I notice sounds out here a lot more particularly. It seems like imaging is a lot better the farther out you get. It does a very good job of avoiding the inside your head kind of sound that you can get with some closed back headphones. And some parts of the staging can be really intimate, like lower toned vocals. Male vocals, deep female vocals seem to be more centristic, whereas harmonies or female vocals that are more high-pitched or higher-pitched male vocals seem to spread out a little bit more in the staging, which leads me to believe that the sound stage is a bit more dependent on frequency response. This is also very apparent with toms, snares, cymbals, things like that seem to space out a lot more. And because of this sort of mixed sound stage where some things are intimate and some things are a bit more wide, it gives the effect of better instrument separation, which is the ability to differentiate between instruments in a mix. It's not just all noise filling a range. You could focus on one particular instrument and hear it and not have to dig through everything else to get to that sound. Everything is very well separated, and I think the interesting staging is part of what's allowing that to happen. I still have paint on my hand from a project recently. This stuff is really hard to get off. And then there's three more things. Power takes to drive this thing. Resolution, how detailed is it? And competition, what is this thing running up against? So as far as power is concerned, you can power it on pretty much anything. The internal THX AAA amps are insane. The noise floor is so low. This is probably the lowest noise floor I've ever heard on a pair of headphones. If I didn't hear the tone, the doo-doo-doo, to let me know that it turned on, you wouldn't be able to tell. There's no hiss at all in the background. These are dead silent when they're running. There is no noise, and distortion is extremely low with it. You can power this off of an external amp, but it really doesn't make much of a difference, to be honest, because the internal amplification is so well paired with the drivers in this headphone. Now, resolution-wise, this may also be a factor. I don't know if it's resolving enough to pick up the major differences on using like a Class A desktop amplifier, but it feels like a reasonably resolving headphone, especially for its price point and especially for being Bluetooth. Now, there are some things, like you're not gonna out-resolve a DT1990. In fact, resolution-wise, I would put this at a range similar to the 6XX, but the 6XX is an open back dynamic that's wired. This is a closed back ortho dynamic that's Bluetooth. And achieving any level of resolution like this in a wireless headphone is very difficult to do, especially a closed one. So bass has a little bit less resolution than everything else. I feel like the resolution is mostly reserved into the upper mid-range. That's its sweet spot where it shines the most. Everything else gets a pass, but the upper mid-range is really, really where these shine in terms of resolution and speed, which isn't to say everything else is particularly lacking, but there's a clear differentiation. So what is this competing with, and does it come out on top? I think the main competition for this headphone is things like the Bose 700 or really the Odyssey Mobius. Now the Bose 700 is a crazy noise canceling headphone, and that's pretty much its entire focus is noise canceling because it sure as hell isn't sound quality. And in terms of sound quality, this absolutely destroys the Bose 700. You just throw the Bose 700 in a trash can and light it on fire, it won't make a difference. The Drop Panda is significantly better. But when it comes to the Mobius, we have a bit more of a story of trade-offs. The Mobius I found less comfortable. The Mobius has more features. The Mobius doesn't have as good of a noise floor. The Mobius, you can change DSP settings on and cycle through. You can also use head tracking, and some of those DSP settings are great for gaming. In every other way, the noise floor, the sound quality, the comfort, I feel like the Drop Panda's better. But this is really gonna come down to a use case. I think if your primary focus is gaming and movies, the Mobius is a clear win. If you have to have everything that does that and is wireless. If you are listening to music primarily above everything else and want a Bluetooth headphone for listening to music, the Drop Panda, no questions asked. The Drop Panda is the answer. The Drop Panda is doing a great job of blending between Bluetooth consumer headphones and enthusiast level hi-fi, right into one. Speaking of that, if you want to see more videos on consumer Bluetooth, I actually picked up AirPods and AirPods Pro because I wanted to know how those are from an audiophile perspective. So if you want to see that video, make sure you stick around and subscribe because you don't want to miss it. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you like this video, please leave a like down below and a comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to get active in the community, you can at forum.hifiguides.com. And as always, don't forget to stick around and subscribe for more videos like this. Until the next one, guys. Peace.